Thanks for joining me with episode 2 of the Wayward series review of the Fallout series. Yesterday we did Fallout 1, 2, and 3. Today we're doing New Vegas and Fallout 4. Let's just go ahead and jump right to it. Fallout New Vegas came out in 2010, and while it was published by Bethesda, it was developed by Obsidian. Since the release of New Vegas, Obsidian has gone on to create some of the most popular traditional CRPGs. They cut their teeth on New Vegas, which is fitting since many of the members of their staff worked on the original 2 Fallout games. And it shows, but before I get to that, here's some arbitrary info about the game. Fallout New Vegas takes place in and around the wasty remnants of Las Vegas. Actually, that isn't fair to say. Las Vegas itself was kept safe from Armageddon thanks to the foresight of a casino mogul named Mr. House. He expected nuclear annihilation and installed security guns around Las Vegas. It wasn't perfect, but the main strip of Las Vegas at least was spared. Players assume the role of the courier. Their first act in their role is to be shot in the head and left in a shallow grave. After being dug up by a friendly security bot and transported to a local doctor, the player then gets to define what kind of person the courier is via character creation. From there, players are free to choose where to go and what, with the only goal from the onset being find the person who shoots them in the head. Of course, the path to finding this man, Benny, introduces the player to various settlements and factions. And there are a ton of factions. From the unscrupulous powder gangers to the governmental New California Republic, which were seen in Fallout 2, to the anachronistic Legion. There are more. So many more. The Brotherhood of Steel even makes their required appearance, but that doesn't mean they have that much of a role to play. While most of the factions have interesting backstories, the focus is mainly on the NCR and the Legion. The two are constantly at each other's throats, since the NCR is trying to take control of the area, democratically of course, and the Legion is much more into freedom. As of the events of the game, that recently fought over the control of the Hoover Dam, and as such, control of power in the Mojave Wastes. The NCR narrowly won that battle, but everyone knows the next one is going to be worse, and it's gonna happen soon. That second battle is the Rome that all roads lead to. Whether the player chooses to side with the NCR, the Legion, or Mr. House, or even someone else like I tried to do unsuccessfully, the battle has to happen as far as I'm aware. That's one of the best things about this game. There are multiple endings based on the faction you choose to side with. I haven't done the House ending, so I don't know how that proceeds. I haven't done the Legion ending either, but I know that they assault and take the dam. Fallout 1 had players deal with the Master. Fallout 2's end goal was to deal with the Enclave. In Fallout 3, players set up access to clean water for the Capital Wasteland and also dealt with the Enclave. Those are have-to-do events to beat those games. Siding with a particular faction is not always required, but definitely was in Fallout 3. Having the freedom to choose here is awesome, since freedom of choice is one of the hallmarks of the series. There are 4 DLC adventures and 3 DLC item packs for New Vegas. The item packs just start you out with various items and aren't worth mentioning at the moment. There was another DLC known as Gun Runner's Arsenal. This adds tons of weapons and weapon modifications to the game, and is really cool. The first DLC to add to the gameplay was Honest Hearts. Honest Hearts sees players guarding a trade caravan to a missionary outpost and being the only survivor of a raid on that caravan. Stuck in that valley in southern Utah, an alliance is made with Joshua, a leader of the local tribes. Joshua is actually a former member of Caesar's Legion, having left for religious reasons. Joshua is aware that the Whitelegs, another local tribe, are trying to join the Legion and wants to keep his peaceful people safe. Ultimately, the player either helps them wipe out the Whitelegs or leads them safely back to the Mojave. The tribes are clearly evocative of Native Americans. Honestly, Honest Hearts feels like just another New Vegas questline. In this way, it fits nicely with the game, but beyond locations, it really doesn't feel all that distinct. Good in a just more New Vegas kind of way. There are even companions whose name I don't remember. One uses guns, the other one uses melee and likes stealth. Next up is Old World Blues, perhaps the most distinct DLC, much like Mothership Zeta was for Fallout 3. Players are teleported to Big Mountain, a pre-war science facility built into a meteor crater. players suddenly wake up in a tower in the middle of that crater. They go on to find the curators of the crater, the think tank. Think tank is a group of 5 scientists who had their brains put into neurogel and gave up having flesh bodies. Not having bodies to worry about for 200 years has left them distant from the needs or feelings of humans, so upon the courier's arrival, their heart, spine, and brain are replaced with computerized components. This actually works out beneficially for the courier, as the mechanical heart is resistant to poison, the metallic spine is stronger and allows for carrying heavier loads, and the processor instead of brain allows for your head not to be crippled. However, the courier wants their brain back, but they discover that the think tank is being terrorized by a former colleague, Dr. Mobius. Big Mountain was not spared from the nukes very well though, and the outside area of the facility are filled with mutant experiments and other lobotomized inhabitants. After going around the facility, players eventually find Mobius and realize he's just crazy. Not in an evil way, his systems just aren't working right. As it turns out, the scientists did not expect neurogel to degrade brain tissue over extended exposure. So while Mobius's experience is an extreme, it explains why the think tank is so distant to the human needs of their experimental subjects. The think tank is done away with as a result. Probably. Maybe. It's a choice. Dead Money was released next. After responding to a radio signal being sent out from a bunker, players are transported to Sierra Madre, a casino near Las Vegas that almost opened before the war. The courier wakes up with an explosive collar on, and a commanding voice lets them know it will go off if orders are not followed. Basically, the courier and a group of other survivors are going to pull off a casino heist. The other 3 people are God/Dog, a super mutant with multiple personalities, Domino, a pre-war ghoul who has a connection to the casino, and Christine, a Brotherhood scribe who has been rendered mute by a malfunctioning medical pod. After navigating the highly toxified city around the casino, which is inhabited by very hostile ghost people, the casino has its official grand opening and is ripe for the picking, just not for the courier. The other survivors have gone rogue and must be dealt with as commanded. God/Dog are practically suicidal, and after either a tense conversation or a more tense fight, they set off their own collar. The problem is the 4 explosive collars on the survivors are linked, and if one goes off, the others go off if they are close enough. The courier barely gets away. Next up is Domino. It's here where we learn the history of the casino. Before all the poo hit the fan, he had planned to rob this casino. He did so by introducing the owner of the casino to his friend Vera, a talented and beautiful singer he knew the owner could not ignore. All things said and done, though, Domino has to perish. Christine is the last to be found and usually the least hostile of the 3. She has been given Vera's voice, which happens to be a key to the casino security system. She helps the courier access the bank vault systems. The courier gets through the last security system, finds the vault, and faces off with Father Elijah, the commanding voice from earlier, then leaves, optionally with as much loot as they can carry. The best thing I can say of Dead Money is that it is more memorable than Honest Hearts, and the characters are very creatively written. However, it's more memorable than Honest Hearts because beyond the characters, it's a bit rubbish. The oppressive atmosphere of the city outside the casino is just not fun. I know, that's the point, but this kind of thing is handled better in Lonesome Road, so this just isn't good. The ghost people are okay enemies, and actually having to dispose of them by decapitation or fire is a neat idea, but they get to be less fun as the DLC goes on. The hologram security system in the hotel is also not fun to deal with. Again, I get it, it shouldn't be fun, but overcoming a challenge is supposed to be fun. This felt like doing a chore. That's what this DLC should have been called. Dead Money, a collection of chores. The last DLC is Lonesome Road. Back and forth by the last living courier beyond the player, Ulysses. Venturing takes place in the Divide. This warhead-laden path is actually the route the player courier took to arrive in the Mojave Wasteland in the first place. At first, the enemies encountered are called the Marked Men, mutineers from both the Legion and the NCR. The courier quickly meets the lone companion of the DLC, an iBot named Eddie. Eddie can override certain electronic systems and communicates in adorable beeps or by playing back recorded things it has witnessed, like as a means to tell the courier what has happened. It doesn't edit the words to create sentences like Bumblebee from the Terminator movies. Eventually the courier encounters tunnelers, very tough burrowing creatures that can kill Deathclaws solo. Deathclaws are also here. By the way, melee only characters like the one I was playing have a hard time with Deathclaws if they aren't knocked down. Anyway, Ulysses is defeated, and now the courier has a choice. Nuke the Legion, nuke the NCR, or nuke nobody. Choosing to nuke either faction actually changes a bit of the regular in-game overworld, which is a nice touch. Overall, as a generally linear story, this is nice. It's challenging without being boring, so take that, Dead Money. I just wish we could continue using Eddie through the regular game, which is what I said when I wrote this. As it turns out, you can keep on interacting with Eddie afterwards. I didn't know that when I wrote this review. In as much the same way that Fallout 2 was the game Fallout 1 could have been, New Vegas is the game Fallout 3 could have been. There is so much more variety here, more weapons, more factions, more perks, more good writing in the DLC, except for one of them. It's also really cool that the courier is not associated with a vault at all. They're just a person carrying a thing that's important to the story. I cannot get over the breadth. Released in November 2015, Bethesda took their reins for Fallout back after the meteoric success of Skyrim and applied their Elder Scrolls engine to the post-apocalypse once again. Headed back to the East Coast again, Fallout 4 takes place in Boston, or as it is known, the Commonwealth. Players assume the role of the sole survivor, a former soldier or lawyer if you pick a male or female character respectively, from before the bombs dropped. This is the first time the games have directly shown what happened before the world went from pre-apocalypse to post, but only just barely. The explosion that hit Boston is actually seen near the end of the intro sequence. After being lowered into the vault, the survivor and their wife/husband is put into the cryogenic tanks to be frozen for the future. They are woken up early, however, and their baby son is kidnapped during an event that also ends with the death of the parent the player isn't. Swearing vengeance and to find their son, the sole survivor sets out into the wild wastes of Boston. The first thing most players do is travel to their old home, in the suburb of Sanctuary Hills. There the sole survivor will find their old robotic butler, Codsworth. Codsworth had faithfully waited for their owner some 200 years or so. However pleased it sounds when initially met, Codsworth quickly has a meltdown and goes on about how horribly waiting was. The sole survivor snaps it out of its rut, and the two go around Sanctuary killing bugs aplenty. Codsworth recommends checking out the nearby town of Concord. If the sole survivor goes there, they will find raiders have trapped a group of people in a museum. Helping out ends up introducing two concept implementations to the game: power armor and Deathclaws. In previous games, power armor had infinite power, but acted as, well, it was just powerful armor. In Fallout 4, power armor provides much more protection and power, but requires being fueled with fusion cores, which are sparse early in the game. Power armor pieces can be modified like armor or weapons, or even replaced with other armor pieces. To that end, there are several different varieties of power armor. And then there's the Deathclaws. In previous games, Deathclaws would just beeline to the player and attack. In Fallout 4, they are much smarter. They duck and weave to avoid attacks, making fighting them much harder to deal with unless you're using VATS. Deathclaws in Fallout 4 are much more dangerous than they were in previous games, almost exactly because they dodge attacks and are smarter. Some even have camouflage, which are just freaking annoying. The two other major features of Fallout are settlements and factions, sort of. Fallout 4 pretty infamously had a function where the sole survivor could liberate and claim small settlements, allowing buildings to be built for settlers to work and live there. While it can be frustrating sometimes, there are certain benefits if the player can set up settlements right. I didn't, but other players have. There are factors to consider when building a settlement, such as access to food and water, as well as power, defense, and beds. Players are given tons of freedom to build their settlements however they please, and there are many settlements to be found. There are 4 major playable factions in Fallout 4. There are the Minutemen, which is the group beset by raiders in Concord. Led by the now meme-famous Preston Garvey, the Minutemen are a militia as per their namesake, who used to be able to be called on to help out people around the Commonwealth. After being nearly wiped out after a betrayal, the Minutemen are reduced to a handful of people until the sole survivor rescues them. Or not, players do not have to, but going forth with main quests is a bit hard without them. Garvey is the one that sets up the quests where the sole survivor finds and sets up settlements. Usually this is done by either clearing an area out of enemies, or going to an existing settlement and convincing the people living there to join via going somewhere and killing someone. The Minutemen are a ubiquitous faction. No other faction likes or hates them, but the people of the Commonwealth can come to trust them again. This is in contrast to a mysterious group known as the Institute. The Institute, which nobody knows much of anything about, is responsible for the creation and the development of synths. Synths are synthetic humans, first seen in Fallout 3 in the quest known as the Replicated Man. Generation 1 and 2 synths are easy to discern, but Gen 3 synths are so human-like that they themselves sometimes do not even know they are synths, and reject the Institute altogether. Some even escape the Institute while knowing they are synths. The Institute wants to rein in these synths and sends out powerful assassins known as coursers to bring them back or kill them. During the main story quests, after breaking into the Institute, it is discovered that, spoiler warning here, the sole survivor's kidnapped son is the current leader. He had been kidnapped 60 years prior, meaning the survivor witnessed the kidnapping, then was frozen for another 60 years. The sole survivor can then join their son or reject the Institute. Joining means running various missions that the coursers normally would, as well as gathering materials needed for various projects. This all culminates to officially declaring who they are to the Commonwealth, since the Institute openly wants what's best for humanity. In direct conflict to the Institute is the Railroad. A reference to the Underground Railroad, railroad agents seek out and help rogue synths. Led by Desdemona, the Railroad actively works against the wishes of the Institute. Whereas the Institute thinks synths are just programmed property, the Railroad thinks they are living beings who deserve to be able to live their lives freely. The Railroad works in secret and are just as much a rumor in the Commonwealth as the Institute is until they are revealed publicly. Railroad scientists actively work on means to track down synths to constantly be a nuisance to the Institute whenever possible. Returning again, the last of the factions is the xenophobic Brotherhood of Steel. Led by the charismatic and talented Arthur Maxon, the Brotherhood shows up in Boston to help out with the looming threat of not just their eternal foes, the super mutants, but also the synths. To the Brotherhood, synths are just another abomination that deserves nothing but obliteration. They arrive with visual glory aboard their war blimp Pridwin as the survivors tracking down the kidnapper of their son. The Brotherhood can be joined by helping out a group of paladins beset by ghouls at a police station. From there, they can do missions and rise up the ranks, eventually leading to an all-out assault on the Institute by helping fix the glorious Liberty Prime. That's how the endings normally work. Players side with a faction, that faction either destroys the Institute, or the Institute wipes out the Brotherhood of Steel and the Railroad. As I said, the Minutemen aren't really figured into this whole thing. I find it interesting that all 3 factions are at least somewhat justified and there is no objectively evil choice. The Institute wants to replace people with synthetic people, sure, but it's done out of a genuine desire to help out humanity with their amazing advanced technology. They would be the faction most clearly seen as evil, but rather for their methods instead of intentions. The Railroad seems the most sympathetic faction since they want to help out innocent synths, but there's some genuine threat there. The Institute actively lets out Gen 3 synths to be spies, so the Railroad is hoping unknowingly spread these dangerous synths into areas where they will be most effective in their roles. This actually plays a part in settlements, since each settlement has a happiness meter that can be affected if a synth is spying as a settler. While they mean good, the Railroad may actually be doing more harm. Then there's the Brotherhood, who thinks that anything isn't human should be unalive. Fallout 4 has the largest selection of companions of any Fallout game yet, and I'm going to name all of them because I think they're all mostly good. Codsworth is immediately available as a companion, and Dogmeat can be discovered quickly. Garvey can join the player, as well as a spy from the railroad known as Deacon, a Brotherhood of Steel paladin named Dance, and an Institute courser named X6/88. There's a reporter that lives in the biggest Commonwealth settlement, Diamond City, which is actually Fenway Park, named Piper, as well as a Gen 2 synth accepted for being helpful named Nick Valentine. You can recruit an Irish raider slave called Kate, or Hancock the ghoul mayor of another town, Good Neighbor. There's even a friendly super mutant named Strong, and another handyman-style robot named Curie, who can be personality shifted into a Gen 3 synth. Each companion has things they like or dislike the Soul Survivor doing, and often their affection gets so high that they grant a special perk, which happens in previous games. Some can even be romanced. I find the companions to be mostly all compelling characters, with Nick being my personal favorite since he's such a smartass. Taking him around the Brotherhood of Steel is especially hilarious since they all hate him and let him know it, but he will quip back at them. I personally don't really like playing with him, however. I instead stick with the DLC companions since they have the most carry weight capacity, I think. And onto that, there are 6 DLC add-ons to Fallout 4, all released in 2016. But 2 of them can be categorized as just add-ons, because all they do is add settlement content. Those are Contraption Workshop and Wasteland Workshop. All these 2 do is add new features to settlements, and that's it. While these are nice for style or fun, they add no quests or new characters. The first of the content-rich DLCs was Automatron. The Soul Survivor picks up a distress call from a man. Upon tracking it down, they witness a group of robots attacking another group of robots. After helping defend the friendly robots, it is discovered the man who sent out the distress call is dead, and only one of his robots, Ada, survived the attack. Ada helps the player track down the maniacal leader of the evil robots, known as the Machinist. The Machinist sees the player as an evil villain who needs to be stopped. Once confronted, the Machinist can either be killed or spared. If spared, it's discovered that they had no idea the robots were killing innocent people. The robots wanted to keep people safe, and RoboBrains reasoned out that the only way to keep people safe is to stop them from being alive. Remember in Old World Blues that RoboBrains degrade over time. Turns out the Machinist genuinely is a good person who made a mistake and feels crappy about it. They're just a fan of an old comic that wanted to help out. As it turns out, there is a character in Fallout 3 who also is a fan of the Machinist comics, but I never did that quest. The big thing with Automatron is the ability to build or modify robotic companions. After doing this DLC, Ada was the companion I stuck with, since I did not have to worry about pleasing her or making her dislike me. She was just a pack mule with a gun for me. That's right, I'm an uncaring person, deal with it. Automatron is a short, fun add-on that adds a bunch of customizability to the game in a good way. The next DLC was Far Harbor. Like Point Lookout before it, players travel to a marshy island in search of a missing family member. In this case, a family hires the Soul Survivor through Nick Valentine to find their daughter, who happens to think she is a synth, and goes to Far Harbor to seek out a synth sanctuary known as Acadia. Upon arriving, the Soul Survivor discovers the island is covered in a radioactive mist that people are worried about. After fending off some misty fiends, the survivor is tasked with finding Acadia with the help of the available companion, Old Longfellow. Longfellow is one of the best trackers on the island and knows all about Acadia and the other major faction on the island, the ever-wonderful Children of the Atom. The leader of Acadia, Dima, is a Gen 2 synth, not unlike Nick. They actually already know each other. The person that the survivor came to Far Harbor for is found working at Acadia, but she has her doubts about it. She thinks Dima is hiding a few things, and she's right. Dima is an extremely peaceful being, but was not always. After finding out a few things about his past, Dima can either be killed or allowed to live. His death is justified due to the things he had done, but his presence in Acadia keeps Far Harbor it's safer. The survivor can convince the girl to come home to her parents, but not once all is said and done on the island. I liked Far Harbor far more than Point Lookout. I feel like the mysterious island is more fully realized here, and the choices made at the end are harder to make, though I made it easily due to thinking the Children of Atom are dangerous nutters. The next DLC was Vault Tech Workshop. The Soul Survivor hears about a vault that needs help, Vault 88. Upon arriving, the raiders attempting to open the vault are dispatched, then the survivor meets the overseer of Vault 88, Valerie Barstow. Barstow was going to be the overseer, but the bombs dropped before the vault opened. She is still there 200 years later as a ghoul, and has the survivor clear out the vault so it can be opened again. Once everything is done, the traditional vault tech experiments can be done. And I will admit the experiments are a tad underwhelming. There are only a few of them, and they all just test some sort of way to control people so they can do manual labor. I was kind of shocked about how short the DLC really was. Clearing out the innards of the vault took more time than doing the experiments, or at least that's how it felt. Overall, I felt like Vault Tech Workshop is recommendable due to all the added settlement pieces and the large settlement area you get to build in. I did not fully utilize that huge space, but I know other players can and have. The last DLC was Nuka World. The sole survivor happens upon a distress call and is begged by a father for them to journey to the Six Flags-esque theme park Nuka World to find their family. All is not well, however, since the survivor is trapped in a gauntlet upon arriving. Turns out the injured father was there to trap people. Getting through the gauntlet leads to a one-on-one fight with the overboss of the raiders, Coulter. The second in command, Porter Gage, actually gives the survivor a means to defeat Coulter since everyone kind of hates him. By killing the overboss, the sole survivor becomes the new overboss. Tasked with gaining the loyalty of the three raider gangs, the survivor must claim Nuka World in the ways Coulter initially tried to but got lazy in leadership and failed to do. The three separate groups are the organized operators, cult-like disciples, and the wild pack. Each group wants to lead, but Coulter convinced them to join under him. He's dead now, and it's up to the sole survivor to treat them however it is deemed necessary to gain their allegiance. This happens via claiming parts of Nuka World for certain raider factions. This is honestly where the DLC lost me. I absolutely and utterly lost all interest in continuing when the first park region became a massive pain to claim. At that point I said screw it and killed all the raiders, which is actually an available quest, which is nice. I feel like Nuka World had a lot of potential, and maybe I went about it the wrong way, but it steered me the wrong way, and I quickly abandoned it. Overall, I feel like Fallout 4 is the most fun game in the series to just pick up and play. It has the most fully realized world owing to having the most advanced engine up to that point, and clearly the best fighting mechanics as far as being a shooting game. It helps that the companions are all each very well written and designed. Some of them go through some major crap and actually grow as people. That said, it did sour on me a bit, but I think that may be a matter of familiarity fatigue. This is a Fallout game I have played the most of, and most recently before doing this review. I want to give it a 5 out of 5, based on how much I've played it, but it just doesn't feel right. Based on the fact that the game is not balanced. I mentioned this earlier in the review, actually in the beginning of this entire video, that Fallout 4 changes how talents are done in level progression. In other games you have skills which you can put points into, and feats and traits, and what have you. In Fallout 4 all you have is your special stats and your feats. There are no traits or skills. While this makes building a character easier, it also means that there's no balance. Your character obviously only gets better, but there's nothing affecting them negatively. In the older games, there were traits that would give you a plus at the cost of a negative, and skills could be leveled up independently of feats. So you could have a character who's really good at some sorts of guns, but not all sorts of guns, or is really good at bartering, but really terrible at gambling. It's just, there's no balance in Fallout 4. By the end of it, you are effectively a god, and the best way I can explain that is the VAT system with a melee character. There is a talent in agility called Blitz, which allows you to, using VATs, instantly teleport to a target, and then attack them. If you have critical hit available, you can deal maximum damage to them like that, and there's less risk of being shot. That said, you can get another talent to make your blitz distance even longer, and you can store even more critical hits. It's an incredibly broken system, which is easy to break. It's not balanced. So I can't justify giving it a 5 out of 5. Fallout New Vegas was more well balanced. Especially as a melee character, I discovered this immediately. In Fallout New Vegas, you actually had to walk up to something to hit it or run up to it. In Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 4, you hit a button, you're there. It's just not fair. The Fallout series is not easy to review as a series. Each game is fun, but in retrospect I should have had the first 2 games as a series and the last 3 as another, because they're also vastly different groups of games. The first 2 games are much more measured experiences. It feels like more thought is put into the individual moments, since the player would have a chance to settle down and make decisions that took time to consider. It's much more tactical. It made it easier to play the role of a character, and I will be darned if that isn't the genre of the games. On the other hand, 3, New Vegas, and 4 are obviously action games first. While the hallmark of choice exists for these games, the spans between choices is either walking or actioning of some sort. Shooting, sneaking, talking, something-ing. But as I said earlier, they feel like good first-person shooter games, not good role-playing games. Of the first 2 games, Fallout 2 is the obvious pick. There's more to do, more places to go, more companions, a better endgame, and so on and so on. It is one of the better RPGs I have ever played and is 100% worth your time and money. Of the other 3 games, the choice is harder. New Vegas is objectively the best role-playing game, but Fallout 4 is the game I would recommend based on sheer number of things to do. It is honestly well-designed and realized game world. I feel like the companions are better well-written, with more things to do to interact with them. Heck, you can even kiss them, some of them at least. But the balance issues get in the way, so instead of recommending Fallout 4, I have to recommend New Vegas. So if you're going to pick 2 games of these 5 to play, pick 2 and New Vegas. That said, there is a new Fallout game coming out soon after this video is being released. Fallout 76 looks interesting because it's semi-online, sort of kind of like Destiny is. And stats and skills are raised by cards? That's weird. But we'll see how it is. Once I eventually get my grubby little hands on it, I'll do a video of it. Anyway, thanks for watching. This series sure took a while. I will think better the next time I tackle an RPG series by splitting them into better groups. Next up, we'll be visiting a classic series. I hope you join me as I take a fun trip through my childhood. Please consider donating, that way I can afford new games, like the aforementioned Fallout 76. You could also join my Discord and check out my Facebook. Bye bye.